Hi, everybody. So I'm here with everybody's increasingly favorite guest, Andrea Burkhart. Andrea is a criminal defense attorney, and she has been on this Johnny Depp and Amber Heard situation for a while. She's a commentator, has been on a number of different programs, and I'm lucky to have her here every Friday to do a big recap of the trial the week before. So we're talking about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. And Andrea, do you want to just right out of the gate tell me, after this week, how are you feeling, do you think, if you are Johnny Depp's attorneys about this week?
Yeah, well, my view is that they're still very much on track in this case. Obviously, as you know, and your viewers know, I use a lot of boxing analogies. Here I am representing today, by the way. It's in part because I have this bruise on my arm. I don't want anybody to think I was in a 3-day hostage situation with Johnny Depp. So no, sorry, I was just doing block counter drills. Anyway,
I just have to say, Andrea, and I'm sorry because people get they don't like it when I interrupt, but I just have to say, like, the idea of an attractive female boxer, lawyer, celebrity legal commentator, I just think that is awesome. So give us some commentary then. I'm sorry to interrupt. Tell us what are Johnny Depp's lawyers, what is that side thinking and feeling right now?
So you never win every round, right? Sometimes you do, but it's not uncommon. And obviously cross-examination is probably the weakest point, that any party faces in the course of a trial, because it's the best opportunity that Amber is going to have to tear him down, undermine his credibility, shake some of that charisma that I think he's been able to show to the jury. So I do think, he got pointed in his cross-examination. They certainly landed shots, and I wouldn't give the round to him. But it wasn't a 10-8 round. He didn't end up on the canvas. I didn't really see him, taking significant damage. By and large, the overall impression people are going to have from week 4 is going to be, okay, this was Johnny's week, so that did kind of overshadow a lot of the other things that did happen. But a lot of good information for him got out this week. A lot of really good evidence got out for this week. I feel like he had a very strong direct examination. So it's just in the nature of things that not every part of the trial, is going to be a win on his side of the card. And it's unfortunate timing wise, of course, some of that is deliberate to end at the weekend while he's still in cross-examination, not yet having the chance to kind of get back into his stride and correct some of that, press narrative that will be out there over the weekend. But that is definitely not dispositive by any means. It's just part of the stage where we're at right now. I fully expect him to recover from this. And frankly, this may be the highest point that Amber Heard has in this case.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just finished watching most of, because I had to work yesterday, and so I didn't see anything in the afternoon. And so I just finished watching a lot of that afternoon cross-examination, and I did not feel like they really landed any like you. I don't feel like they landed really any big blows. Some of those texts that he sent, his conversations, is the language he uses with Paul Bettany, and that sort of thing. I think that, yeah, it doesn't look good, but I think that people are going to understand that this is a guy who is into expressing himself in these poetic but dark ways. And I think they understand, there's a kind of a roughness there that doesn't seem to have translated into his behavior toward women. Maybe it even translated at times into his behavior toward inanimate objects, right? But I just think that the jury, and again, the fact that you and I haven't talked since the audio came in. Yeah. But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that audio just like a huge earthquake for this in the end?
The audio is really everything. I mean, the audio it is them. It is them in their relationship. It is laying bare what the dynamic was. And so all you have to do is listen to it, and you will hear crystal clear what that dynamic was. I do hope that as the trial continues, that they do play more parts of that. They have admitted into evidence some pretty large digital files. It's approaching 6 hours total now of time, between 4 different videos. So obviously they can't play all of that for the jury in open court. They will go back into the jury room for deliberations, and the jury can listen to it if they choose to, but they're not required to. So there's no real guarantee that the jury is going to hear anything unless it does get played for them in the open court.
Well, geez, I hope that, I hope that they do listen to that, because and you've gone through the different audio files like I have on the Fairfax site, but I did not notice like that compilation file that I put together of like 5 minutes straight of Amber Heard admitting to violence and stuff. I has all of that been entered in yet to the record? Are we still waiting on some of these audio files? Because I couldn't find some of that material, but maybe it was just me.
No, it looks like we are still waiting for some audio files. In fact, the portion that was played at the end of the day yesterday, that was, the extremely disturbing portion that they closed the day on, that's not contained in those video files that got uploaded yesterday, which is a little bit odd. So I do intend and want to go back and look at that part of the testimony to kind of see what happened with that. It does seem like that should be evidence. So it was just a little bit of a peculiarity.
Yeah, it does seem like there's not always a match up there, but between what's released and what's discussed in court. But I mean, that's interesting from our perspective, because that means there's probably still some stuff that we're going to get that we haven't, some audio that we haven't heard before.
And the big audio that we haven't heard yet is the one from Australia. And so that's right. One that, there may have been a missed opportunity back on day 4 when Dr. Kipper and Debbie Lloyd were on the stand. Because they did, have a version of what happened in Australia that can't really be reconciled with what is on those tapes. And so for people who haven't heard those tapes, it basically looks like what happened. The recording was made on Amber's phone. It's, I think, a couple of hours long. And it's essentially capturing the aftermath. It's like if she turned on her phone recorder and left it on a counter while all this stuff is going on, so it just picks up everybody coming in, coming out.
Why did she do that? I'm sorry. Do we know why she did that before we get into talking about what's on there? Do you know why Amber did? Why would she record the aftermath?
I mean, why does Amber do what she does? What we know by now is she's got this chronic pattern of recording. She's been recording for a long time, and she's been recording in these very personal, very uncomfortable types of situations, just based on what we've heard in the evidence. So I think that's a hell of a good question. Why is she recording? It certainly looks like, what somebody who's trying to compile a dossier, might do. We've seen her use it in this very selective, misleading type of way to, just cherry pick pieces out to make it look like something that it isn't. So it looks to me like it's just part of the overall abuse dynamic.
It's very, very strange. And I don't know if part of it too is that she was hoping she could get some sort of material that she could then splice together for her own ends, but then she never did that. Anyways, but we were talking about, about how there's this audio out there apparently from Australia, or from the Australia incident, that hopefully, do you think that's going to be played for the jury?
I mean, I do hope so. That to me is in many ways much better evidence than these evidence of the conversations, right? Because they know that they're being recorded, and so you can see situations, especially this second one that just got uploaded yesterday, and a lot in the longer, like 4.5 hour one that got uploaded the day before. where you can see that she's saying things that mimic the accusations she's made in the UK and now, you know, in this trial as well.
Right.
And Johnny has consistently denied those, you know, throughout the recording. So it's all very consistent with his description of her, you know, the Dr. Anderson's description of her as a jackhammer, him describing not being able to have any voice. And you just have to, you end up just having to give in and placate her because she's so insistent on what happened, even though it's like Oceania, you know, is always at war with East Asia in Amber Heard's world. It's part of how she, maybe this is a common thing for narcissists, but certainly with her, how she exercises control over people. I mean, Orwell's point in writing that is that you really control somebody when you control what they believe is true and not true. When you can convince somebody to accept and just go along and give in that 2 + 2 = 5. And it demonstrated the entire process of how they got, spoiler alert, how they got Winston to accept that 2 + 2 = 5. And when you think about that, and the parallels that that room, what happened in that room had with Johnny Depp's experience, you can see a little totalitarian operation in Amber Heard's game.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was thinking about when you were talking about the authoritarian, I was thinking about the Sylvia Plath poem that everybody loves. You know, she talks about every girl adores a fascist or whatever, but I was thinking about Amber Heard and like this sort of like, to me, the image, one of the most tragic images is Johnny Depp having to repeatedly lock himself in bathrooms.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this major movie star, this guy who, whatever his personal problems may or may not be, who it seems like treated everyone in his life really well, and certainly not abusive and respectfully, and someone who was a great performer and actor. And as we found out in this trial, has been a real student of his craft and has taken it very seriously. And basically created the character of Jack Sparrow. My point being, the idea, the indignity, it's one of the things that does make me mad in this trial. The indignity of thinking about how this raving lunatic, or whatever we want to call her, certainly as narcissist, was beating this man and chasing him and haranguing him and forcing him into bathrooms. And then on the audio that we heard, then the next day or week or whatever, depicting him as being the one who prolongs the fights. You make the fights worse because you run away. And he says, I have to run from bathroom to bathroom to room. You know, it's just very, I hope.
And then you see that in the kitchen cabinet video, you know, where she chases him. He's clearly frustrated to the point of slamming the cabinet doors, and you know, doesn't want her, and she will not leave him. It's just such a consistent theme that you hear on these audios of her following him, her refusing to give him any space at all until he gives in to her.
That's right. No personal space. And you know, the audio that you and I listened to that came out this week, the new audio, he talks at one point, he says to Amber, he says, you know, he makes reference to his upbringing, and he says, you know, when I was growing up, I just wanted to make it something like, I just wanted to make it stop, or I just wanted to get away from it. And you know, if any of you who know the testimony, Depp's testimony, what it's been about his mom, you know, she was always on him. And I've said this in one of my videos, but it was very tragic to me, how Depp testified that when you would walk past her, when he was a child or a young man or whatever, when he would walk past his mom at any given moment, there was a part of him that kind of was always like flinching, because you never knew. She just liked to randomly hit. It sounds like the mom, Betty Sue did. She just liked to randomly hit Johnny. And so it's just very sad to see these patterns repeated and to hear him talk about it. And does make me very angry at Amber Heard, who just, you know, sat there the whole trial with this very unpleasant expression on her face, ugly. Anyway. What else would you like to observe? Sorry.
Well, I think you were starting to head into a point that's really sat with me a lot this week as we've watched Johnny, and you use the word dignity. And I think that's one of the big impacts that this case has had, both with the people who I think support, Johnny Depp and agree and appreciate what he's doing, but also potentially to the people that are a little bit more new to the case and to what's actually going on here. There is so much power in the sacrifice that Johnny Depp has had to make of his dignity, of his privacy, of his, things he said in private to his friends, things that he did that were captured on these recordings in his most, vulnerable and weak moments.
Yes.
Johnny Depp knew all of this was going to come out at the trial. And so I can't help but look at this process of what we're seeing through the lens of the hero's journey. And, the hero's journey, it, I'm sure, from Freud. Freud was obviously very into hero archetypes and things like that. I came to it through Joseph Campbell and Aristotle. But it's just this idea that a very powerful theme that has long been reflected in mythologies and legends and things like that, because of the power that they have, to move people, are these kinds of common patterns about how a hero has to go through a journey and experience, a transformation and, overcome adversity and return home. And so, one of the other things that Johnny said early on that really stuck with me about that is how when he first came to Hollywood, he was Johnny. He was just Johnny, the kid from Kentucky, like you said, with a bad family background, a lot of dysfunction, working whatever, shift job he can get, basically. And then he was blessed with this miracle of success in Hollywood, this 1 in a million chance that transformed little Johnny from Kentucky into Johnny Depp. And he talked about how he can't say his own name because it has just become so imbued with all of this meaning that other people have assigned to it.
Right.
And so for so long now, he's been Johnny Depp, and that's such a big part of his character and how people see him. But part of this process of giving up his privacy and giving up his dignity in favor of the truth is really a way of kind of releasing Johnny Depp, letting go of the attachment to Johnny Depp as this idol, that people look up to in Hollywood as just, again, all of these things that are associated with that name, and really trying to come back to a closer resolution of being Johnny and what it was to be Johnny way back when, as the child, being beaten by his mother, the patterns that caused, the way that's affected him, the flaw, that he has, that's not his own fault by any means, but behavior and these cycles, they get hardwired. That's how the cycle of abuse is perpetuated.
Right.
So, again, from a hero's journey kind of narrative arc, there's just so much here that I see, and I think this is potentially a transformative moment for him.
Well, it'd be nice. That's a lot to unpack there, and I appreciate that. No, I mean that. No, I mean that as a compliment. There's just some things in there that I noticed. I think the idea that I really like how much of his testimony, even though I know there were some people, including my mom, who felt like it was rambling, but I really felt like it was really good at drawing you into his narrative, so that you really did feel like, it's talking about the hero's journey, that you really did feel like you got a sense of this man and who he is and struggles he's faced, and coming through that. And I think that that he's a very likable person. He also seems like he has a lot of depth.
Mhm.
And the heroes, and one of the things that I think they were wise to emphasize is the fact that he originally wanted to be a rock star, and that the acting thing, you talked about how it was sort of this depicted almost like this miracle or whatever, and as he or something he stumbled into, right? And the fact that he talked about how he really had to over time, like, take this seriously and learn to take this as a craft and everything, I thought was interesting, and also sets up the damage that she's done to him, right? That she's taken this away from him and taking this his craft away, or in his career. Anyway, I think that's really cool, and people should check out Joseph Campbell, who Andrea is referencing. All right. So let me ask you a couple of questions. What did you think was the strongest moment for Johnny Depp of this past week? Are there maybe one or two that stand out for you?
Well, it's so hard for me to look at that objectively in terms of what's going to be the strongest moment in the jury's eyes versus what is going to be the strongest moment, overall in the summation of the trial, because we have this information from the other trials about what we're likely to see. I have to say that Johnny's direct exam, it was very powerful. It was very effective. Yes, I understand the complaint that it was rambling, but it allowed him to get into his flow and to connect with his words, and the flow and the jury's observation of that is so much more important than the content of what's coming out of his mouth, which is another important thing to remember for the cross-examination as well. The cross-examination was, quite frankly, soporific. It was nap-inducing. It was boring to the point of discomfort. And so what I think people don't always recognize or appreciate is that the jury still is at a point where they don't know what's important and what's not. They have a hard time focusing on the substance because they don't know what to focus on. And so the jury is much more just left with an overall impression of what they thought. It's more about, how they feel at this point than it necessarily is about what they know. And so that's where Johnny is effective. It doesn't matter what he says content wise. He's very effective at getting you to like him, to feel that he is sincere and authentic, that he is speaking from his heart. He didn't, from my perspective, come across at all as scripted. Sure, he might have had, some talking points or whatever that he'd thought about ahead of time, which is normal when you've been thinking about this trial, that you've been planning for years. But, had this been a scripted, planned, thought out, rehearsed type of situation, it would have been a lot smoother. It would have been a lot more well constructed. In that sense, I think the rambling is kind of helpful to him, because it does make it look like this is Johnny Depp talking off the cuff. It's the first time he's gotten to talk in America, like, since any of this has happened. And so,
and you don't want him to, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish it.
He's got a lot to get out, so many things that he wants to be able to communicate. And that's not always going to be all linear and tidy. And the more linear and tidy they had tried to make it, I think the less authentic it would have come off.
I think that's a really smart observation. I was going to say that I agree. And I think that I would say that I think one of the dangers for a very acclaimed actor like Johnny Depp is that people are always going to be asking themselves, yeah, but is he acting? And so anything that seems unpolished, anything like with the rambling, anything that makes it seem that he is not over rehearsed and that not everything that's coming out of his mouth is calculated, I think is a plus. And so I'd agree with you on that. What did you think was What did you think was one or two of the weakest moments of this week? Well, let me say of Depp's testimony or cross-examination.
Yeah. Well, obviously the way it ended was pretty atrocious.
I didn't see it. Would you mind giving me a little summary? The audience might appreciate it
Yeah.
too.
Well, so first off, to get a sense of the context, the strategy on cross-examination was this very obnoxious and from my viewpoint, probably objectionable approach of just placing, a prior text, a prior piece of testimony, a prior, some evidence from somebody else, things like that, placing it in front of him, getting him to acknowledge that it existed, and then not asking him anything about it at all beyond, did I read that right? And the whole point of a cross-examination is that you're supposed to be confronting them with the conflicting evidence. But the whole point is for them to have an opportunity to explain that. And then the jury can, look at their explanation and evaluate, hey, is that something I believe or not? Is that a good explanation? Or is there maybe a better theory that the attorney on the other side will give me to explain, what he explained? And so they didn't do that. They very specifically did not invite him to explain. So when we get to the very end of the day, that's the context that we have. That's the practice that has kind of been set up for what to expect. They clearly see that the clock is coming close to 5 o'clock, and so what they do is they choose to end the day by playing one of Amber's surreptitious audio recordings. It's the one from San Francisco, in which she is in there with Johnny Depp, ostensibly trying to prevent him from cutting himself.
Yes, I've heard that audio. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
but at other points, maybe being a little encouraging and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was very strange. Yes.
It's a horrifying audio. It's just a horrifying audio because how do you not know this is one of the darkest moments in a person's life to have been driven to this point? And so they played it and they ended it. No question to him about it. Nothing. Played it, end it. That's the end. We'll come back on Monday. So just a deliberate choice to drop that as the last thing,
dark ending
that we're going to be left on going into the weekend, and not even a chance for Johnny to say, this is what that was about. That's a low moment. It's a low moment from a just dirty tricks standpoint, obviously. But I expect it's also probably one of the lowest moments we're going to see in terms of the evidence that comes in against Johnny.
Wow. And I heard that audio, but I did not realize that that's where things were left. So I guess I made it almost to the end. So that audio, it sounds, what part of the audio do you think sounds suggestive of her perhaps even encouraging him to harm himself? I remember thinking the same thing, but I don't remember the exact part. Do you remember what that was specifically?
I would have to go back and listen for specific words. She does talk to him about, at least implicitly, about her own experiences with cutting. She tells him not to use that knife. It's dull. And then
she's like, if you do it this way, then that could kill you. Almost kind of as if to say, like, if you.
Yeah, like guiding him. I mean, like the kinds of things that are not too far away from what happened in the Michelle Carter case that you brought to my attention and I looked at. So yeah, just this really horrifying context. And part of what's so unfair about that is because that audio has been lurking in the background as one of these basically the support for the argument of mutual abuse, that he used threats of suicide and self-harming in front of her as a way of abusing her. And they certainly want to, because we don't have the whole context for this audio at this point. We have context from other parts of their relationship. But we don't know how this situation came about, how it concluded. And we know that Amber cherry picks the audios.
Right.
So that's part of what is so unfair about how this has been handled, is because it's been deliberately, it's like the TMZ video, it's been specifically cut to make it look like something that it's not, because when you get that flavor of, oh, Amber Heard is kind of encouraging this to happen, that does put a dramatically different spin on what is the significance of Johnny Depp's behavior here.
Why? And now, was that entered into information? Was that audio entered in evidence by Amber Heard's team or by Johnny Depp's team?
So, okay, so here's the interesting thing, because that audio was played in open court at the end of the day, but it is not among the audios that got uploaded yesterday. I haven't been able to listen to the whole 4.5 hour video yet, so or audio. So I don't know if it's pieced in with that. I don't think it is, but I really don't know. I haven't heard it yet, and so. We don't know. At this point, I don't know if it's an evidence or not. If it was allowed to be played in open court, it's supposed to be evidence.
Who played who? Which side? Reminds me though. Which side?
Rottenborn played it. And so part of my suspicion is that this was a way of getting out ahead of some more damaging stuff that came in. Certainly the other audios that they introduced yesterday, the second one, it clearly looks like we're going to slide this in because it's damaging. We're going to try to paint it as being an audio that's really detrimental to Johnny Depp. But then when you go and listen to it, you realize, no, my God, this makes Amber Heard look terrible. So it may be that type of situation as well. They chose to take this cut at this moment because it's going to be the most play they can ever get out of this audio.
That makes a lot of sense. I wondered is there some way in which they could actually perhaps view, Amber's team could actually view this audio as being good for them? Does it? I know that like. He holds a knife, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but he holds a knife and he says, and he's like, cut me. And I know that's like masochistic. It's not anything directed at her, but do you think maybe they're thinking that sort of spins as him being, unstable with a knife, potentially violent, or what?
I think that's the direction they're going. They're trying to use it as a character type of evidence to suggest he's unpredictable and potentially violent. And I think they're also using it to try to bolster what I think is the only, defense they have on the facts at this point, which is to try to argue this was mutual abuse. This was not abuse by Amber. It was bilateral abuse on both sides. And so, which is an interesting, fallback. Anyway. But they seem to want to argue to the jury that if there was mutual abuse, then therefore there's nothing wrong with what Amber Heard said in 2018 in light of the context of everything else that she'd said over the course of the years. I don't think that is by any means a get out of jail free card, because the overall point is a defamatory implication. And does this imply something, about Johnny Depp that is untrue and damaging? And I think you can still get to that, quite frankly, even if he hit her, which there is no evidence, at this point still of him ever doing.
No evidence of violence. Yeah, that's right.
But yes, there's a distinction between violence and abuse. And particularly when you're talking specifically about domestic abuse, there's a whole body of meaning in literature and stuff that is associated with all of this. So, that's where I think they're going with it. It's just the only thing they can really do with the facts at this point.
Do you feel like, okay, so how do you feel like Amber Heard has presented herself in court? This might be a little more trivial, or maybe not. How do you feel like Amber Heard has presented herself in court this week, as opposed to last week? Do you have any comments on what you're seeing, what you've seen?
Um, I haven't been watching a split screen. I'm not sure if any of the streams have been running a split screen the whole time.
I don't think much, no.
Okay, so I've only seen her on occasions when the editors decide to pull her up. There's obviously editorial decisions involved in that, and so it's hard to put any particular significance on it. Overall, she looks hard. She doesn't look like a victim. She's very assertive with her posture, her gaze, her complete demeanor as, just sort of frozen and unreactive. It has a very, you can't hurt me, you can't touch me kind of communication. At the same time, it looks like she is trying to put on, a face of like sadness or hurt or something that it's very hard to put
some
an actual
recognizable human emotion, right?
Yeah, it's horror. I mean, it just, there's so much wrapped up in this expression that she's putting on her face. I do have an impression of potential, of course, I don't know anything, but sedation or, some type of medication management that may, affect her alertness, I guess,
Yeah.
a little bit. We've seen a couple moments that have been clipped online where the mask slips a little bit. Like there's one where you can clearly see her, doing all this mouth work because she's trying not to smirk. She caught herself, wanting to smirk and laugh, and so had to get back to that neutral face.
Right.
But overall, I don't feel like her presentation is really helping her in this case.
No.
The coldness is not, it's what she wants to portray as the heroic victim,
Right.
the one who's been unable to be broken. Amber Heard can't be broken. That's clearly the message she wants to send. But I don't think that's a message that's really going to resonate with a lot of people who have suffered from domestic violence. They understand, the emotions that are involved with that. And yes, there are victims of domestic violence who were not broken and have survived that. But the process of reliving, of hearing, of facing your abuser,
Right.
of going back over that story, had you been put through this type of emotional ringer like Amber Heard claims to have been, you just have to assume that, how that reads on a normal face is a lot more like how it read on Johnny Depp's face telling the story than it did on this implacable face of Amber Heard listening to it. Johnny was very expressive throughout his testimony. Just another advantage I think that he had. You could really see the sadness. He's got a very expressive forehead. There were points where you could see him thinking back and kind of getting his 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah.
And so those are things that a good actress could mimic, but we're dealing with Amber Heard. So we did not see anything like that with her.
It's been really kind of amazing to me, and I don't know why it should be necessarily, because we've seen up to this point, over the years, so much just astounding behavior from her. But it has been kind of amazing to me the disregard, to put it as you did the other day when you said something to the effect of, when you show a jury that you're going to basically disregard their expectations for you, that can be a risk. And it's been interesting to see everything from the sour face that you're talking about. And not that she's there to look happy, but it just doesn't look like, it's like mean, not genuine. The sour face, the hair, that I don't think her hair has looked, maybe yesterday, maybe that was the first time that I looked at the hair and I thought that it didn't look overdone or fussed over too much, but it's looked very like overdone and fussed over and stylized. And then those, as we talked about, the very mean looking clothing that she's been wearing up until very recently. It's just, to me, for someone who's an actress and everything, she's just really, she and whoever she's been working with up to recently, it's just not in terms of stylist or whatever. It's just not. It's just astounding to me that it's been so tone deaf. And like you were saying about the thing about a broken woman, that she clearly doesn't want to depict herself as a broken woman. And I agree. And the problem is, like we talked about, is that winning this case perhaps may hinge on getting the jury to feel sorry for her, to feel like she was a broken woman, that she was broken by this man. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming increasingly, I think, would be increasingly difficult for a jury member over the course of this trial to come away with that impression that this, I can see some jury members looking at this and saying what a number of people say, well, they were both toxic, or it's it's just such a hot mess. That's not how I feel. I don't feel like it's equivocal, and I know you don't, but that will be the reaction of a number of people. It's just sort of like, the whole thing. But Amber Heard claimed that she, in that Washington Post op-ed and elsewhere, she put the claim out there that she was a victim of domestic violence, not that she was in a mutually toxic relationship. Yes. If Amber Heard had written a Washington Post op-ed about what it's like to be in a toxic relationship or whatever, I would, I wouldn't like that either. But it's different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I wanted to ask you about, at this point, how you're feeling about things. It's still, I understand it's very early, and I know lawyers don't really like these questions this early on, but do you feel like overall the needle has been moved from 51-49 or whatever you thought the original odds were, 51-49 that Johnny wins?
Yeah, I do. I'm not going to put any numbers on it. I do. I think that the odds have widened in Johnny's favor. And again, it's largely the audios that are responsible for that. The audios tell the entire story, but it's more than that. There's a saying with good trial examination and cross-examination, you don't tell, you show. And that's what the audios do. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp both can get on the stand and talk about what they thought happened all day, but the tapes just demonstrate what the experience was in a way that testimony never can.
Right. No, that's true. That's very, very true. And like I said, in this week in one of my videos, when those tapes were played, and it sounds kind of silly, but for those of us who've been following this, when those tapes were played, it kind of felt like this transcendent moment for just a brief amount of time, that like, oh my God, finally people are hearing this, and Amber Heard has to sit here and she has to listen to it, like how, she's brought to account publicly, at least for a little while, and Johnny gets some kind of, vindication. It was nice to hear that audio, and I was watching Legal Bites, and the kind of the gasp that a couple of the attorneys who were on there who have not heard the audio, just because they're not following the case. But the host had, of course, Alita, and she was like, I told you. But when the attorneys heard the audio, they're just like, what?
Yeah. No, it's true. And I mean, that's the thing. We who have heard these audios have known for a long time that the audios are key. We know that they cost her friendship with Amanda de Cadenet, completely changed her viewpoint. She had initially been a strong supporter of Amber Heard, put her in the Girl Gaze video. And as soon as those audios were out, boom, distance herself from that whole scene. So we know the power of these audios, and that's what, in my view, is always going to sway things in Johnny Depp's favor in this case, which is kind of ironic, and humorous in a way. If we are, if we're continuing to look at this entire situation through the lens of the hero's journey, there is something poetic in Amber Heard's need to record, her insistence on trying to prepare this dossier to destroy Johnny Depp, that ends up being her own undoing.
Right. Exactly. It is very much a poetic, an example of poetic justice. And I think, you were talking earlier before we got on in a text about how you were going to do Joseph Campbell to my Freud. And the thing that I keep thinking about with the Freud is just it's just the sort of relentless, like, death drive or self-sabotage, capacity for self-sabotage that some of these people have, that we talk about. Amber Heard, and then also we talk about the Manson case too, but it's pretty astounding. One of the things that I wanted to talk about too, Andrea, is again, is the addiction, drug and alcohol thing that has been brought up a lot this week, and it's been the subject of a lot of the cross-examination, and even to some degree the direct. You know, I felt like it was, oh shit, sorry. I could stabilize this a little better. Okay. I felt like it was handled better, somewhat better than in the UK trial by Johnny's side, but I still felt like there was some evasiveness, and maybe there on his part, and maybe that's just sort of inevitable. I don't know. I feel like that it would have been effective if he had owned up to the alcohol abuse more honestly than he did. But you know, whatever. Again, I don't think that any of this is going to take away from the fact that the jury's going to see that Amber Heard abused him. But anyway, that was something I was kind of like, you know, about. And I think the thing is that's unfortunate for Johnny is that the drug stuff still has this, you know, stigma for some people. Yeah. And so it's almost like, so I think that there was kind of I guess what I'm saying is I felt like with the way that his side has handled it, there's been this sort of tension between, on the one hand, like wanting to be like, hey, you know, what's wrong with this? So what? Or this is not important, or, you know, whatever. But then on the other hand, like being sort of afraid to be honest, maybe about the fact that he's had some more extensive addiction struggles that he wants to own up to. Of course, I know, I guess that maybe they're afraid. They don't want to perpetuate this image that he would take all of these drugs or get really drunk and black out and then maybe become violent. Is that really the fear ultimately with copping to the drug and alcohol stuff?
Well, there's so much going on with the drug and alcohol stuff. You know, that's such a super complicated issue. And so part of it is a factor of, we don't really have a clear message yet from the defense what the point of it is.
Right.
All we have are a couple of suggestions, both of which are frankly a little bit disturbing. Suggestion number one is that he's such an addict that he blacks out and does wild and crazy things, and therefore he's not a reliable narrator as to whether or not he abused Amber Heard. You know, that to me seems to be an enormous stretch, given number one, the absence of evidence that he abused Amber Heard above and beyond Amber's word, which has many credibility problems of its own.
And those staged photos, hasn't it sort of been proven, at least by some of our online sleuths in the Depp supporter community, that those photos are staged?
The table scape has been thoroughly debunked many times online. Folks have been able to figure out things like that the signature on the driver's license, which is conveniently turned over so you can't see whose it is Amber Heard's signature.
Wait, so just for my audience members in the Marilyn Manson community, because I have a lot of Marilyn Manson supporters who aren't as familiar with the Depp thing, I want y'all to understand that we had Amber Heard was doing some major hoaxing here. What we're saying is Amber Heard staged this photo with like cocaine, and there was various other things to make it look like Depp was on this real bender. And she puts her own driver's license in there, basically, right? Accidentally.
It does. There does
support evidence.
A pretty strong case to be made that it's hers. There was also there's a, you know, because there's lines of cocaine on the table next to the little property of Johnny Depp box, right? That's not that's not a product placement situation right there.
She puts the box there with Johnny Depp's name. And this is something that like Evan Rachel Wood could admire here.
It really could. But so then there's this little tutor that's there with the lines, and the tutor is a tampon applicator, and so this actually came out in the UK, where Whitney Enriquez, Amber's sister, admitted that was hers. That was her trick, was to use the cocaine with the tampon applicator. And she tried to spin it off as, oh yeah, Johnny always thought that was a great trick. So
he stole it, right? Yeah.
But so there was that. And then, you know, there's the Infinitum Nile mug that's on the table that, you know, Amber, there's like a gazillion pictures of Amber Heard carrying this mug. She always has this mug, took it to every meeting, right? So that I'm sure, so that people would know. photo. She's got this link with Johnny Depp. It's in the kitchen cabinet video. She's holding this mug that they put into their own evidence. So yeah, the tablescape photo in and of itself can be debunked, hoax wise, but there are also drafts of, of the photo of the tablescape.
Oh so my God.
There are other photographs of, different setups, different configurations, moving things around. So yeah, that is going to be, that's going to be a problem, as well as demonstration of the hoax.
Wow. And this has been, and some of this has been entered into evidence, because the photo with the JD box and the driver's license and stuff, that was entered in court evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of Johnny Depp's cross-examination. They used that photo. So
yeah.
That's going to be an opportunity on redirect for them to come back with all the other drafts and show the differences.
I really hope. Yeah, I was going to say, I would hope that Johnny's team can in some way prove or demonstrate or suggest to the jury what happened here, that this was a hoax photo, staged photo.
Well, so we were talking about the drug taboo and
yes,
kind of the challenge in being able to deal with that. And so part of the problem is that it's really a no-win situation for Johnny. Again, sticking with the hero's journey narrative, a hero always has a tragic flaw. And part of the tragic flaw that I think we see in Johnny Depp's story is the excesses of Hollywood, the debauchery that's available. He may not be, the most extreme example of it, but when you own the Viper Room, I mean, you're at least adjacent, and so it's this double-edged sword of the blessing of the fame and the success that he had, was that, these types of opportunities were available to him, and it culminated in the apparently beautiful, apparently perfect for him woman, that came and has undone so much of that success that he initially got.
wow.
The problem with the drugs, I suspect, is that, which is part of the other side of this too, she has used the drug and alcohol use to hammer him for so long. That is one of the things she's been able to, poke at him about, to try to control him, to try to suggest, oh, if you just fix this, everything would be okay. It's not my empty soul. It's your drug and alcohol use, and so between the combination of just the broader social taboo on the drug use, and the fact that Amber Heard used that as a weapon to beat him, I have to imagine Johnny Depp has a lot of internalized guilt about it. And so, yeah, that makes that a very complicated and tricky issue for him to navigate in a setting like this. Ambivalence does not play well in a jury trial. Juries like things black and white and crystal clear, and the gray area is harder for them. The drug stuff, from my perspective, is very much a gray area. Right. So I think he did the best he could to not let himself be pinned in a position where Amber Heard's black and white framing of the drug and alcohol issue, he does not accept that as true, and that's important. But it is a possibility that the cost of that is, not being able to get into that gray area nearly as much and deal with it as in the complexity, that in a non-trial setting, it might deserve.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. That's good. That's really good analysis. What else? Was there something else that you said you wanted to bring up?
Oh, I would love to talk about the storytelling aspect of this case and Johnny's testimony in particular. You had talked about this in your recap video, I think for day 4 or day 5, which was the first day that Johnny was on cross-exam, that was the first day that Johnny was on his direct examination, and we heard the background about his story, growing up in Kentucky and going to Hollywood and stuff like that. Johnny Depp is a masterful storyteller. There is a structure to a story that, and a film that is pretty well, established, consistent. It works. You give the exposition, you have the rising action that culminates in some type of climax, and then the action, falls away, and there's some kind of resolution, or maybe not. Maybe you're left in tension at the end. But just this overall structure to how a story is told. And I think that we see that in how Johnny Depp presented his own story, again, as this young man suffering from this abuse, and later encountering that cycle. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, because the trial itself is a storytelling process, and it's much more abstract. It doesn't necessarily follow that same, rigid structure. But overall, the story is either of Amber Heard being a liar, or of Johnny Depp being an addict wife beater. And so the jury is listening to the evidence and evaluating, which one of these stories fits better with the facts that have been presented to me. One of the things that Johnny Depp did that I thought was just a piece of brilliance was bringing in the Captain Jack character and talking about the characteristics he brought to Captain Jack, that the influence he had with the Warner Brothers cartoons, or I forget if it's Warner Brothers or the other one.
I think it's Warner. Yeah, I don't know.
Wile E. Coyote. He talked about having the Wile E. Coyote inspiration for Captain Jack of this character who can have the vise dropped on their head, but you're not worried about Wile E. Coyote getting through that. In the next scene he's going to be okay. He's just going to have a little Band-Aid, and that's sort of the magical continuation that those types of cartoon characters have. And so he wanted to incorporate that same kind of reality twisting potential in this swashbuckling style pirate movie. And that was what he tried to incorporate in Captain Jack's character, was the resilience of the Wile E. Coyote, and how you can never count him out, basically. I thought that was really brilliant for a couple of reasons. But the main one is really the priming of the jury, to have that in their mind and to be thinking about that, associating that with Johnny Depp as somebody who can have the vise dropped on his head, the anvil dropped on his head, but at the end of it, still just have the Band-Aid, because that's a character that you like, that's a character that you want to vote for, and that's a character that you don't want to be the one who, finally puts the arrow in the heart of Wile E. Coyote and sends him to his grave for good. You want to give him a verdict that lets him go on and continue with his life. So that I thought was absolutely brilliant.
That's really interesting, and not something that occurred to me when he was giving us that particular part of his narrative. But now that you mention it, I think that's really, really smart. And I think I think also that, plus the fact that they started with Christine. At the time, I think that we both felt, I'll speak for myself. I felt like Christine's Dombrowski, his sister's testimony, was lackluster and probably even kind of problematic at times. But in hindsight, seeing how we started in his narrative, we started with her talking about his childhood and the kind of a boy he was, the kind of abuse that he suffered from his mom, the way that he would respond, that he'd run away. It really, I think that also has sort of allowed me to look at him not only, like you said, as this character, as this person of resilience who has been through a lot, has come through it, like a roadrunner or whatever, but also seeing and empathizing with that child, and seeing how that child has grown into a man. Now, one question I wanted to ask you, first of all, when do you think that Amber is going to take the stand? Do we have any idea about that?
Oh God, we got to talk about Amber taking the stand. I didn't even put that on my list.
Yes, that's where I was going. I know, and it's off the cuff, but I want to start considering it because in response, I was thinking about how Depp has done it. We've talked about it, and it has been a success. I think we agree. What options are available to her in terms of how she would present herself, or how they would present her, or I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, you probably need more time to think about it. But off the cuff, is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I expect it to be a very challenging experience for her. Historically, we know that Amber Heard has been resistant to the extreme to being placed under the microscope of examination, even in a private deposition behind doors. So receiving this kind of scrutiny in open court on a televised trial that the nation is watching is a threat to her beyond, I think, what she has ever experienced in her life.
Incomparable, really. I can't think of any. Yeah.
And when I say she's been resistant, I mean, we've talked before on your channel about how she tried to get out of the first deposition during the divorce with Johnny Depp. There were reports that she, you know, was screaming, crying hysterically, refused to go into the deposition room. Johnny Depp's lawyers ended up having to go back to court to get an order to compel her to sit for it. In the interim between her refusing to sit and then finally sitting is when the TMZ video was released. I thought that timing was rather interesting through a framework of attempting to reassert control over the situation, or, you know, threatens type of situation. But it also played out in the London Fields litigation. Amber Heard was sued by the producers of London Fields, the movie that she made that is so highly regarded that you can stream it for free on YouTube. Nobody cares about watching it, and there's like 900 and some views. Nobody cares about the copyright to this movie.
Have you tried to watch it? I tried. I couldn't get more than I tried. I couldn't get more
I've
than
never tried. I've
it's,
never tried.
Oh my God, it's so bad. Anyway,
you're stronger than me. And so she was sued by the producers, you know, long dispute about just interfering with it, refusing to promote it, breaching her contract, things like that. And so there was similar shenanigans in the London Fields litigation where she refused to be deposed and be discovered and stuff like that. She ended up getting sanctioned for that, took it up to the California Court of Appeals, lost, got sanctioned again at the Court of Appeals. And then after that, her part in it settled. So yeah, this is an established tactic of Amber Heard is to, you know, run and try to hide, because at her core, she's basically a coward. This being such an enormous escalation of the threat that she has ever faced from that kind of exposure, I have to tell you, I'm not going to be surprised if we see some pretty extreme measures from Amber to avoid being put on the stand. You know, when I say measures, I am not ruling out, you know, a prediction of something like a last minute hospitalization, some type of crisis. I mean, anything. She is desperate to try to get out of that. So that is
basically feigning, you mean feigning a mental breakdown?
She may not need to feign it. Honestly, you know. But potentially, yeah, something like that. It could be, you know, it could be something more mild, like, oh, the baby has COVID or some, you know, some stuff like that. But just basically, you know, escalating effort. Little Elon, or Una. As she becomes more and more desperate to get away from this threat, you could expect that her measures would be more extreme as well. So that's the first hurdle that you have to clear before even getting to what does Amber Heard's testimony look like.
Well, what would happen, Andrea, hypothetically, if she did do the hospitalization thing? Would that that postpone it inevitably, or what happens in that case?
No, there is not going to be a postponement. So what I would expect would happen is that Amber Heard would try to make up an excuse to not testify and then use her deposition instead, so that she doesn't have to be there for it, but she still gets to put in her evidence for her case. I would not expect that to be particularly well taken. Obviously, there are different circumstances. Using a person's deposition in lieu of live testimony is available. It's an option when the witness is unavailable. The problem is that the witness's unavailability needs to be legitimate, and not just something that they themselves are responsible for bringing about. So that's what I would think her goal would be, is to let this all play out on the screen where she doesn't have to be there, personally subject to it. If that's not going to be accepted, then Amber Heard doesn't get to put on a case that Johnny Depp abused her, basically, because all she really has as evidence is what she's said over and over and over. The only person on her witness list who has historically, testified to any personal evidence of Amber Heard being abused by Johnny is Whitney. Whitney claims to be a witness to the staircase incident. I suppose in theory, there could be some testimony from Rocky about the aftermath, that she supposedly observed from the December 15th and things like that. But that's the bottom line. That's all they're really going to be able to get in if Amber Heard isn't there to present testimony and put her evidence in. So it's not quite the same as like a default judgment, just not appearing at all, but the practical effect of it, I think, would be pretty similar.
Wow. So basically like a default judgment. You brought up Whitney Heard briefly. Well, let's talk about her in a moment, but are there any other delaying tactics that you could think of? You're talking about some kind of major move that Amber might make aside from the hospitalization. Is there anything else that you think of?
I mean, depends on how desperate she gets. She could just, fly away, flat out refuse. She's not in jail. She's not legally obligated to be in court at all. So there is nothing preventing her from fleeing. It's just that obviously that's not going to look good for her, and it's not going to, contribute to a good outcome as far as the resolution of this trial. You just never know. I mean, we've been talking about instability from a psychological standpoint. Clearly, Amber, listen to the audios, okay? Spot the unstable person. It won't take you more than 5 minutes.
Oh my God, like 15 seconds.
It makes her very, very unpredictable. And so you just don't know how far she might go.
Wow. Let me see if there's any. Oh, okay. I did want to ask you one thing about Whitney, and then I guess that I'm done for the day.
Do you want to talk at all about Kipper and Lloyd and the nanny state stuff?
Yeah. So let's say, do you feel like Kipper and Debbie Lloyd's testimony was damaging for Johnny in some ways, even though I think on the whole it was damaging to Amber, right? Because they contributed, I think, a lot of insight there into like the abusiveness and also some things that she lied about, and the fact that they hadn't seen any injuries on her when she claimed that she had been injured. So I guess, what's your assessment overall of their testimony? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think overall their testimony was beneficial to Johnny. The most important thing I think that they got in were the notes, is particularly the note for that December 17th, office visit that Amber Heard had and has tried to kind of deny having or reframe. that shows clearly she has no injuries, describe her skin as intact and normal, no concussion, nothing along those lines. So that is extremely damaging to her account of having the 2 black eyes, the broken nose, the broken ribs, the split hair pulled out of her head. That, you know, she covered with the Amica cream for Jimmy Kimmel. But I think another piece too that came out of that that we didn't know that is extremely damaging was the information that Amber had asked for those records in August of 2016 during the divorce process and got them. So Amber Heard knew from the beginning that this record did not support her account, and she still went on into the UK to make up this elaborate, extreme. You've heard how, and it's
wow.
There's got to be some psychology in this that maybe you can shed light on. The fact that even her lawyer now has described this, the December 15th incident, as possibly even worse than Australia. Okay, Australia, where he allegedly penetrated her with a liquor bottle. Like, December is worse than that. And yet here we have this note that shows more, you know, shows no injury to her whatsoever. There was nothing wrong with her. Is there some kind of psychology that would compel her, you know, to take such a contrary position to what the actual proof is? I mean, I go back to this Orwellian type of process that she engages in with the truth, where it's her whole way of breaking people down is to get them to admit things that are untrue are true because Amber Heard says so. Is this maybe like an extreme example of that? I don't know.
Yeah, like someone who, I hate the term gas. I feel like I get kind of tired of the term gaslighting, but like someone who really revels in, or has some kind of, maybe a better way of putting it, is some kind of psychological need to force others to accede to their reality, to this false reality that they've set up, or almost like a tool of manipulation, right?
Yeah. It's like, it's such a massive overcompensation. But
you're saying that she would. Yeah, well, I think everything she does, I think so much of what she does is, and it's pretty, I think that isn't that an aspect of BPD. I know we're not psychologists, but you know, she was diagnosed by their family therapist, or their marriage therapist, right? Didn't that therapist tell Johnny that she thought the therapist thought? Which therapist was that who said that, by the way?
I believe we don't know yet. It hasn't come into evidence. All we know still at this point about diagnoses is what we got from Johnny Depp's witness statement in the UK. We didn't hear it from Kipper. We didn't hear it from Lloyd. We might hear it from Cowan. Connell Cowan is the therapist that he you know, directed, that Kipper referred Amber to once they decided she needs some psychological treatment, you know, in this detox process with Johnny, which, you know, kind of telling.
Right. Right.
But yeah, we haven't heard from Cowan. I don't think we will until Amber's case.
I see.
We might hear as well from the IME. Dr. Curry, of course, the independent medical examiner, is the forensic person in all of this. So she's looked at all of the old records. She's probably done her own testing and has a lot of that background. But as we sit here right now, all we have is Johnny Depp's description of her as borderline toxic, narcissistic, antisocial in his witness statement. And we have the audios.
God. Yeah, the audio is pretty much just like, you know, Trump everything. Well, so
so here's where I think Kipper and Lloyd, where they really dropped the ball, is that, you know, they were not willing to step up and acknowledge what they knew. And we know that because both of them distanced themselves very strongly from Australia, from the aftermath of Australia, from what they were told about how the injury occurred, and all of that. And like we talked about it at the top, we have an audio of a 2-hour recording of the aftermath of the Australia incident that Dr. Kipper and Debbie Lloyd are in, where they are talking about trying to find his finger. And Amber Heard is in the meantime freaking out in the background, and they're talking about increasing her dose of Seroquel. And Amber, and he talks about, she cut it off, like he uses, Johnny's framing, the bone's been shattered. He's aware of what happened and the significance of it.
In the audio, Kipper says that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but the most he was willing to give them in his testimony was just that Johnny told him how the accident occurred.
Why do you think that is? That he was? Yeah, that's a good. Why was he restrained in that?
And then Debbie Lloyd was even more restrained. She remembered nothing, right? She is the classic wiped out my entire mind type of witness. And the reason for that is because that is how they have been counseled by their attorneys, because they have a mandatory reporting problem. So California has a mandatory reporting law for that applies to people, medical providers who provide physical treatment for injury. And so if they treat an injury that they have reason to believe was caused by assaultive behavior, they are required by law to report that to the police. If they don't do that, they can be charged and convicted of a misdemeanor crime. They can lose their licensing because of that. So it creates this really terrible, perverse set of incentives for, on the one hand, Johnny is their patient and they're providing concierge care. And it's part of the challenge that always exists with domestic violence, is that so often the victim does not want to report it. They don't want it known. They're still trying to process it, deal with it, come to terms with how to manage it in their own time. And so these mandatory reporting statutes have come about as kind of a way to take that out of their hands, to sort of try to protect them from themselves and intervene, on the part of the state, for people who are not yet in a place of wanting to intervene to protect themselves. And so you can see that there's a good intention behind it, but there is just a massive perverse incentives that are created by these types of statutes. People will lie to the medical providers about how they got the injury, because they know, if I tell this doctor the truth about what happened to my hand, the doctor is going to have to tell the police about it. I don't want the police to know about it. I won't be safe if the police know about it. In this situation, we have these concierge doctors. They're providing this specialized, private care to Johnny Depp. They certainly have an interest in maintaining that arrangement. And part of what they need to do that is to take Johnny's lead when it comes to what are we gonna do about the potential consequences of what Amber Heard has done here. And Johnny Depp clearly, until we get to the 2018 period or so, when he finally filed his lawsuit, he wasn't ready to hold her publicly accountable for her abuse. So they went along with that, ostensibly, to help him get what he needed in that situation. But then here we are with the consequence that they're in a position, they're in a conflicted position. Their own interest in protecting their criminal records and professional records, their ability to keep doing their jobs, is in conflict with Johnny's need for them to now tell the truth. So it's just been a little bit of a sad indictment, in my view. And it just put them in a bad situation, because regardless of Kipper's relationship with Johnny and stuff, if the victim is not ready to name the accuser and call out the abuse, then the mandatory reporting doesn't fix that. It doesn't fix that basic problem.
That's a good point.
They have these incentives to lie regardless. And then we see, like we've seen in this trial, that being turned around and used as a weapon against him. The fact that he protected her because of these mandatory reporting requirements is now used as a sword.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things like, sometimes I can, well, let me rephrase that. I think that it was particularly poignant when Depp has said in the trial, or I think he said in the UK trial, that it's just, that he tried so hard to protect her image with their friends and family. Like, he didn't want other people, and that's very common, to want other people to perceive that person that way. I wanted to ask you about Whitney Heard just briefly. I have just been really trying this week to wrap my mind around. I cannot decide what I think about Whitney Heard. I cannot decide if she is, okay. So what got me thinking about this is that Johnny described her this week in his testimony, Amber's sister Whitney, as being basically, if I remember correctly, like significantly less developed in her self-confidence than Amber. And he made a couple of other remarks that he was trying to be very kind, and it came across that way, very kind and gentle and diplomatic. And basically, the impression that I got is like Whitney was kind of, is kind of Amber's doormat, perhaps not even entirely too bright, or just not very sort of like guileless, not able to really manipulate her and certainly not Amber. I don't, to what degree do you think Whitney is culpable in what she has done to Johnny in terms of in the UK trial, and then I could presume here, giving false testimony about him, hurting him? Do you think that Whitney is in this really horribly abusive relationship with Amber, where she's really a victim in and of herself, or do you think that she has kind of a diabolical side, that she's getting something out of this, or what do you think about her?
Well, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive is the problem. I think that when you do get into the abuse dynamics, there's so much complexity there. One of the things that Johnny talked about was, and I think it's common with these types of relationships, was his ambivalence towards his father for leaving. His dad had, been just beaten down and broken by the meanest woman Johnny's ever met, his mother, Betty Sue. And yet, Johnny struggled to really reconcile with understanding why his dad left, but also being so angry at his dad, one, for tolerating it in the first place, two, for how he handled leaving. I believe that's a very common experience for people who have grown up in these types of relationships. So with Whitney Heard, the characteristic that has landed for her came from Kate James's testimony. Kate James described her as the kicked dog, the family dog that everybody kicks. And I think
terrible. So terrible.
It is heartbreaking. It is terrible. It's an absolutely horrifying thing to think about, especially when you know about the family background and David Heard's conviction for the dog fighting. This may in fact be a really apt metaphor for Whitney and what she's gone through.
Wow.
And so part of the reason why that's such a complex situation is because if she's a victim, which it sounds like she is, that's not her fault. She can't, she's not responsible for the circumstances that led to her being in that position. She's not even necessarily responsible for how that programmed her to cope and survive and behave in the future. But the problem is it still makes her vicious. We saw with the Michael Vick dog fighting ring. Okay. When you take a dog, an otherwise perfectly good dog, and you victimize it and you terrorize it, you often can't get that dog back. That's just part of the tragedy of these types of cases, that no, it's not the dog's fault, but you cannot have a vicious, aggressive dog roaming free to hurt other people. And so
Right.
most of those dogs had to be destroyed. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. That's the hard thing about Whitney. And that's why, I think Johnny is being so kind to her, even knowing, what is coming.
Right.
Because he understands she didn't choose to be that whipped dog.
Right. 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 And it's something we talked about at times before on my show. So, and we'll be talking about again. It comes up a lot in these narratives of people who are, who are abusive, who themselves are, trapped in cycles of abuse. And anyway, it's a question for God or for a later time. But I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Is there, unless there's anything big that we haven't covered?
No,
all right.
I think we've covered the high points of the week. The case just keeps getting bigger and bigger. One of the things about this case is that it just touches on so many bigger issues. It touches on the problems with the media. It touches on the problems with the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Just so many big issues. The failure of the mental health systems. As more and more time goes on, the taboos, the social taboos against men being victims of violence. There's just so many cultural issues that intersect in this trial that are starting to take shape now, and I think is only going to continue to pick up steam as the trial continues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to liken it again to the OJ trial, because the OJ trial was certainly different in a number of ways, but it was similar in just the fact that by the end of it, it seemed to have sucked in, it become like a next point for so many different issues. And like you said, and it's interesting you bring this final thing that you brought up here, the significance or the wider relevance of this trial, because my guy was telling me that he hates celebrity news and all that, but he said that he's been seeing this coming up in on some of the general political websites that he looks at. He has some different political websites he's interested in. And anyway, but when the story comes up, there are all these comments where people will say, "Oh, enough of the celebrity stuff, the war in Ukraine. I'm really tired of hearing people say war in Ukraine." Yeah, we know there's a war in Ukraine, but that doesn't invalidate our interest in this. And I think that it's unfortunate that because celebrity is attached to something, that in some people's minds invalidates it as a serious topic. Because it's not, and it is serious, and it has all of these points of cultural concern. So I think that's interesting that you brought that up, and yeah, it's also a really astounding drama. This is not something. I mean, once people actually really, I think too, a lot of people don't really know the ins and outs of the story to know how astounding it is. All the co-conspirators and the hoax and the twists and the turns and Elon Musk and James Franco, and it's just like a whole like cultural soup. Pop culture soup. So anyway,
it is, and it's such a lost opportunity in my mind for the folks that do have this trial come across, come through the algorithm and dismiss it for those reasons, because there is a lot of important stuff here. Where I kind of want to leave it as a thing to think about is that, we know statistically that men and women are victimized about equally, in terms of domestic violence. It's about 1 in 3 over lifetime rates. But men are 75% of those men will report having threats of false accusations being made against them. Abusive women levy false accusations against men at a rate that is truly horrifying. And this is so inconsistent with the narrative, the political narrative that has been being fomented for years about believe women and the taboo against calling out women's misbehavior and labeling it what it is and making women be accountable for it. So I think this case has the potential to be historically extremely significant, largely because of issues like that.
Absolutely agree. Very insightful. Thank you, Andrea. We will, and by the way, you know, long and the short of it here is we did think it was a very good week for Johnny Depp. And so I hope that it continues. I hope that next week is strong as well. And we'll be here next Friday to recap that the next week and talk about it. And of course, Andrea is going to be on some, I think, different shows next week. And to my viewers, as always, I appreciate your support. Hit me up on PayPal, Patreon. The links are below, and you don't need a PayPal membership to tip. And so, yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye, Andrea. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Go Depp. All right.